I invite you to join me in a brief prayer. O Holy One, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts and minds be acceptable to you, O God, for you are my source and my sustainer. Amen. On this World Communion Sunday, when we sit among neighbors, we continue to consider building a beloved community. I'm struck by the scripture's focus on increasing one's faith when our nation is struggling just to stay together. My sermon is titled The Function of Faith, which I could understand maybe seems a bit trite or misguided. Nevertheless, if we are looking to build something of hope, we must consider how faith functions both within our church, the structure itself here on our campus, and then also with people we encounter out in other settings, other community groups, other situations. As we join our voices and actions collectively to foster unity and offer ways to welcome and support immigrants, I believe that God reaches out to us as well as through us. Those of you who might have missed our beloved announcements, whether you're joining from home or you've come in the building late, the musical parts of our service are an act of justice in and of themselves. The musical mass of the immigrants uplifts those who are being actively persecuted at this time in our nation's history. The entire liturgy works to create space for immigrants so that they might be embraced. This promotes solidarity and makes a proclamation through song, raises awareness, and also the importance of welcoming all who are labeled as strangers. You might remember throughout the biblical text, it's not just immigrants who are labeled as strangers, but others as well. We hear so much in the psalm which we've sung out together this morning. Bring me to your dwelling place, your holy mountain. Me conduzcan hasta tu monte, tu morada. As Eileen shared from scholars previously, the disciples have a struggle that is not unfamiliar to many of us. They believe that their faith is insufficient to the responsibility that they have for one another. The implied message that we have from Jesus and throughout our gospel is that we do have enough faith. Theologian Kimberly Bracken Long helps us work through the word and the challenge that Jesus brought to the disciples. She writes, Jesus changes the question from how much faith is enough to what is faith for, i.e., the function of faith. He, Jesus, tells them through both image and story, you already have the faith that you need. Now fulfill its purpose, Jesus says, live it. I want to tell you a story about some faith that I was shown this past week. Thanks to many of you, I've become involved in some organizing work in the Portland area through Portland Immigrant Rights Coalition. Some folks refer to this as PIRC. I know some of you are also connected to this work with Portland Immigrants' Rights Coalition because they team up with the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice, which we support in our ministry. As a clergy person, I've been welcomed to accompany people who have been going to or coming from immigration court. My first time doing this accompaniment after some training was this past Thursday. I felt pretty apprehensive given what has been going on with our local government agencies in contrast with federal orders. As the news broke last weekend about the federal administration deploying National Guard troops to Portland, I became pretty fearful about providing this accompaniment at immigration court. But like most ministers would do, I was reflecting about it, right? Of course, I knew that whatever my level of fear was, it would pale in comparison to the level of fear that people who were headed to court must be experiencing. I mean, at this point in our nation's history, unimaginable. I needed to go even though I felt pretty afraid. So I showed up. Bring me to your dwelling place, we hear in the Psalms, your holy mountain, me conduzcan hasta tu monte, tu morada. As I arrived downtown on Thursday morning, it was partly rainy, you might remember, very gray, Oregon. I was all buttoned up with my clergy collar on. That's what we were told to do. I felt about 50% ready and 75% apprehensive. Well, you do the math. That leaves at least 25% of just random anxiety floating around. A lot of anxious energy. Almost as soon as my shift started, I was notified someone requested a clergy accompaniment to the bus stop. As a young person came out of the building, I met them where they were, and I did my best to greet them in broken Spanglish. And I also tried to watch for unmarked vehicles, which we have been told to do. Hard to do both at once, I would say. I imagine that they must also be thinking about unmarked vehicles. The person asked me where the closest bus stop was in some form of Spanglish also, and unfortunately, I had to indicate with both lack of words and gestures that I did not speak Spanish, but that also I'm new to Portland. I suggested we follow the smartphone instructions. My awareness of my lack of Portland knowledge somewhat heightened my anxiety. But I was the only one who was there. No other clergy were there that day. As I began to accompany this person, the one who's been labeled a stranger, over to this bus stop, which I didn't know where it was, nor did they, I realized that this movement of walking was one in deep faith, but more so of the deep faith that the individual had, not me. Here's this person who likely has little to no reason to trust our immigration system, but who has come out on this rainy day, hoping, longing for a brighter future. I mean, what faith? A faith system that this person has is bigger than the broken system of immigration in our country. Our system is nearly broken, and yet folks show up hoping, knowing that they must. As we continued our block-and-a-half walk, I kept checking for unmarked vehicles, and I thought about what the person must feel like, the level of bravery that one must have to show up for such a court appointment. I mean, can you imagine? We waited for a few minutes at the bus stop. I received word that another person was requesting a clergy accompaniment to their car. Mind you, now I was not at the front of the building, of course. Bring me to your dwelling place, your holy mountain. Me conduzcan hasta tu monte, tu morada. I did my best to check in with the person who I was already with at the bus stop to make sure they were comfortable with my leaving. I couldn't really tell, to be honest. The idea is that the clergy collar can deter a needless detainment of an immigrant who has done nothing, mind you. Someone who has shown up. Someone who's trying to work in the system. Not knowing how comfortable the next person would be waiting on the roadside, I got some form of confirmation from the first person I was with, and then I ran back to the courthouse. And as I was running, I was imagining the journey that the folks must have taken to even get into the U.S. And now they're putting trust in this system. As I walked over to the second person, I thought about what it must be like if they had walked through a desert to get here, and they didn't know exactly where they were going, in a way much more severe than my not knowing where I would be walking with the next person I was to walk with. They were just walking in order to survive. So as I was with this second person, I was walking to a car with them. I realized that they actually didn't know where their car was. I figured that out because they had given me this slip of paper, this parking slip from a garage. And they looked over at me, and I looked over at them after about 3 blocks, and I said, "You no sé. I don't know where we're going." Well, they were able to recall because they had to, right? This is what we do. And I believe that this is the same as how Jesus has told us in our Gospels. You do have the faith that you need. Walking by faith is what these folks were doing. The implied message that we have from Jesus is so clear. It's that we do have enough faith. We hear so much in this psalm that we have sung together this morning. Bring me to your dwelling place. The psalmist is crying out because they must and because they do have faith, even though they feel like they do not. Your holy mountain, they sing about. Me conduzcan haste tu monte, tu morada. Those disciples, again, they believe their faith is insufficient to the responsibility that they have to one another. Their faith is not insufficient, and neither is yours. You do. We do have the faith that we need. We just have to tap into it. The function of faith is to propel us forward with that gospel love. You know, the one that's meant to be taken to all people, not to some. I believe that God is bringing us to a dwelling place far more peaceful and justful than we could ever imagine. Me conduzcan haste tu monte, tu morada. Do not be mistaken, my friends. God is calling you, yes, you, to a deeper faith than you could even imagine. In the midst of turmoil, you are meant to share this faith with the people that you encounter in many, many ways. We do have enough faith, my friends. Our call is meant to move with such a deep wisdom. I pray that it will be so for us this week and throughout our lives. Amen.